Hello, this is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 106 of Gaming with Grief, and I'm calling this episode The Life of BEN. And I just want to remind you guys that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. So go there, let me know what you think of the show, give me some comments, stuff like that. Or you can subscribe on iTunes. The podcast will hit there Sunday night. Give me some likes, some stars, stuff like that. Also, let me know how well I'm doing or what I can do to improve. Or you can go to the Google Play Store and go subscribe there if you're on an Android device. Do what you would do there. I've said before, and I'll say it again. I do not understand Android. That's not my ecosystem. Do what you would do there to let me know how I can improve the show and give me the ratings and things like that. Or you can go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com and you can go there and just drop me a line. Let me know what I can do to improve the show, things like that, and, so on and so forth. So, or you can go to Twitter and find me at Just Little Joe. Go there. I will get better about promoting this. I always say that, but I'm trying to get better at promoting this. So I'm calling this episode The Life of BEN because my friend Benjamin Erish Nelson, I was very close with him when I was younger, and we were still close until he died. But he was born on May 7th, 1972, and he passed away on March 8th, 2019. So the previous episodes, when I've done like these kind of revised obituaries, it was me just solo talking what I felt because it was my family. I do consider Ben to be my family, but I actually interviewed Ben's stepbrother, Joseph Johnson, and talked about growing up with Ben. It's his stepbrother. The only thing that I didn't get was like when they were, living together, when that started. But they both played tons of games together. I know I've known Joseph 2 years less than I've known Ben, if that makes sense. I knew Ben when I was 18. I think I met Joseph when I was 20. So we've known each other for a long time. And we sat down for about an hour and just talked about Ben's life. And I thought this was a great way to memorialize Ben. We made each other laugh, remembering what Ben meant to us. And Joseph told me what obviously Ben meant to him, and it was just great for us to sit down and talk. So without further ado, this is me and Joseph Johnson, Benjamin Erish Nelson's stepbrother, just talking about what it was like to grow up with Ben. And we're kind of just giving him a long obituary that couldn't fit in, a newspaper or some website. So without further ado, here you guys go. So the question I asked you last night, because I know when I met Ben, I was 18, and he had already been playing D&D for years at his house with friends, and I know you obviously how far apart were you guys in age? That was one thing I never asked you, because I know how Ben was he was like 40. How far apart were you guys in age?
I want to say we were 7 years apart.
So he was 40, you're 41 or whatever right now?
I'm 42, so...
Oh, okay. 40.
49.
Right.
That's right, because the way I always remembered it was I was 30 years younger than Dad.
Oh.
He was like 20 years or 30 years younger than my mom.
Okay.
So my mom's 69, so he would have been 49.
Oh, I got you. So, obviously I came into the group way late. When was the first time, because you and Ben had played tabletop games and stuff, when did you guys start playing tabletop stuff together?
We used to play like Risk. That was one I remember us used to play. We didn't start doing D&D until like basically him and Debbie got together.
Like that was the early 90s or late 80s?
I'm horrible with years.
I think that when I remember they talked...
it was like early 90s.
Yeah, I remember them talking about that moving to Washington, and it was them just mentioning, I think it was the early 90s, and so...
That was the tabletop side. That's when we started playing D&D. That's when I started doing trying to figure out what kind of characters I wanted to play and all that.
Right.
Because, when you're younger, you're like, I want to be this crazy character that's got all this.
The 40-page backstory of like...
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk on that online, and like, where does your character go if you've already written 20 pages of backstory on, all these cool events? But that was one thing you and I talked about before we were going to do this interview about Ben, was whenever he had a crazy story, it was through experience. It wasn't through backstory. When I ran into...
Basically all gameplay.
Yeah, it was all... His characters were kind of... Yeah, he's a giant, a half giant or whatever. But then he would tell stories, and I was like... Is that backstory? And he's like, no, that happened 2 weeks ago. Like at the table, my guy, was in a gladiatorial arena and could heal and was the only one that could survive through each turn because he was healing. Everybody else had died. And it was all that kind of stuff that I loved about Ben, because again, his wife, Debbie, was more of the backstory person, where she always had these elaborate backstories. And the table sessions were good, but Ben was the one who it was like, oh, you did all this stuff, like with die rolls and role-playing and things like that. So that was one thing I liked about Ben. And you said you started it was like the 90s. So like, did he approach you or did you approach him? Was he playing with obviously he was playing with Debbie and his wife and everybody at the table, but did you just come over and were you like, what are you guys doing? Like,
I used to, me and Ben have always been close. That's why we always call each other brothers and not stepbrothers.
Well, I mean, you're technically half brothers, right? So it's like, yeah, but I mean, yeah, but you're brother. I mean, yeah.
But me and him have always been really, really close. I mean, it's just how we've always been. So I would always go and hang out with Ben. So if Ben, before Ben got with his wife and all that, and he'd come to spend the weekends at the house. Well, pretty much we'd spend the entire weekend together. That's what it was. But yeah, I mean, I would just go over to his house and I'd spend the weekend with him, and we'd start Friday.
Yeah.
We'd roll up our characters and decide which character we're gonna play for this, this campaign, and then the whole weekend we would spend playing D&D and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had those sessions too. With you guys, I would go Friday or Saturday night at Ben's place. But then I had some friends where it was the same thing, where they were in Tacoma, and it was when I actually met them through Ben. It was Chris and Josh, and they said, well, we're doing stuff at our house for the weekend, so you either come over to Ben and Debbie's or you can come over to our place. And there was a couple weekends where I liked Chris and Josh because it was smaller. There was fewer people. There was him and there was maybe 3 or 4 people gaming, and at Ben and Debbie's place there was 10 to 12.
Yeah, it would get crazy sometimes.
Yeah, and then you had no idea. You were like, what's happening? And then if you didn't speak up, there was a lot of people that got resentful about, when you would travel, you'd be like, well, what do you, Joseph, what are you doing? And you're like, you forgot about me 2 hours ago. Last time I was in the inn. Are you going to talk to me or not? But that's one of the reasons nowadays I don't run big groups, because it's just hard to keep that momentum, going.
And what was so bad about it was great to play, and I loved playing those games because I liked the people we played with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 people. But it was fun. But then the side talk. There was just so much side talk that you'd start playing, and 3 hours into it, you've only went to one area.
Yeah.
Where you'd be playing until 2-3 o'clock in the morning and barely got anything done.
Well, speaking of that, years later, I went to Chris and Josh's. They invited me back over, and this was years after, and they had 8 people over, and they were running a game, and everybody was very respectful. There was no side talk. But I watched the clock, and I was the 9th person on the initiative roll. And you watch the clock, and Chris was telling an amazing story, but he was spending 10 or 15 minutes with a person. So then I'm terrible at math, but you're looking at the clock so you spent, it's been 4 hours, and you spent 30 minutes with me, basically. It's one of that's still, and everybody there was respectful. Nobody was talking. People were reading the rules in between their turn or trying to read up on something. But I remembered really looking at the clock going, man, I don't ever want to, that was a better experience. Nobody was being disrespectful. Chris was telling a good story. It was just like, I don't want to run a big group again. Like I don't want to do that. I think that was one of the reasons why I stopped going over to Ben and Debbie's, because it was just like, I was exactly like you. I love playing. I love the experience. Maybe there was one or two people I didn't get along with, but we're not getting anything done role-playing wise, or, like how many campaigns did you guys start versus how many did you finish,
Well, I don't think we really ever finished any campaigns, and then every once in a while we'd go from D&D to like Cyberpunk or something like
Vampire
that.
or...
Yeah, you get that one Cyberpunk game and you're like, oh my god, this is so awesome. I'm so ready to get it, like really get into it. And then we never played it.
Yeah, or next week was D&D. But I mean, so I asked you last night too to think about, did you and Ben ever, when you were playing together, did you guys play siblings, or like were you, I mean, off-board obviously you guys are really close, but did you ever like, hey, let's roll up siblings and run through this or whatever,
Me and him, I can't say we ever like rolled up siblings. Like Ben always had those couple of characters that he played, like Kazar or Eldritch Blood Rain or something like that.
Yeah, all those names ring a bell, because he had a small stable of characters, but again, he had lots of experiences with all of them, and they were higher level, and so he wasn't one of those guys that made a character every week. He's like, no, I'm gonna play, Kazar. You're like, oh
yeah,
wow.
That's what he would do. I mean, there was very few times that he would, unless somebody said, no, we're all starting off at level 1 characters, or you need like a level 4 character, something like that. Otherwise, it was all of our older characters. That's like I said, I would play my Blue Walk Toodles or my Drow Nightshade.
Yeah, I remember Toodles.
And that ended up somehow being more aligned with Debbie, his wife's character, than it was his.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I would have liked to seen you guys do that at the table of like, we're gonna be siblings, and like that would be cool. And then if you guys really would have, ran your, like, okay, so just like we were doing with our thing of like, oh, we're both rangers, like you need to be the up close ranger, I'll be the far away ranger, stuff like that. Like it would have been cool if you and Ben did that. Like, I'm a frost giant, he's a fire giant. We'll come up with some weird backstory. But yeah, like
when we were younger, I mean, me and him, it was so funny that we were like night and day. Ben was always the one that was like, yeah, it's whatever, and I'm the one who's always like, no, I'm getting into this, or I'm doing this.
Oh, right.
So it just always, we would always give each other crap about stuff like that, but it was just, that was just how me and him always was. He'd always call me his little preppy, snobby brother.
Well, you did look nice in a polo shirt. I mean, you still look nice in a polo shirt, but back in the day, I was like, I remember that one time, like I don't know if it was, like you weren't unshaven and disgusting, but for one, I remember a couple of sessions, you like had shaved and just bathed and like came out in a polo shirt and shorts, because we usually play in the summer, and I was like, wow. Like, wow, like really, you're like, hey, my character is a prince. I'm going to dress the part. I'm doing method. I've cleaned up. I'm wearing a belt, everybody. Like, I remember you coming out. There was a couple, I was like, wow, okay. All right. Todd came to play.
I mean, that was me starting to get into my, okay, I love playing, but we're playing on Friday and Saturday nights, and that's when all the fun stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go out.
Yeah.
That was the thing, too. That I mean, I always had but I remember sometimes I came over and like Ben would be playing just a board game with his, with Tommy, with his son or whatever, like his stepson or whatever. And Tommy would always kill Ben. I remember playing one of the risks, like the like 2042, whatever the future risk was, 2099, whatever it was. And his, for whatever reason, Tommy always got tricked into killing Ben. because the other people, like all the other people that are playing, are like, no, Ben's a threat. And Ben be like, listen, Tommy, they're messing with your mind. And Ben would show his resources. I have no resources, Tommy. I'm no threat to you. I'm on the other side of the map. I'm trying to hold on to what I have. And somehow there was some Jedi mind trick where Tommy would just go after Ben. Every time Ben was like, what are you doing? And then the other guys would be there collecting resources. And since I only played the game once or twice, so I was like, you guys just tell me what to do on my turn because I've only played this game twice, you know? And Ben constantly screaming at his stepson, what are you doing? What are you doing? Don't listen to them.
Risk always got crazy because,
yeah,
especially if like Rob was playing the master manipulator.
Oh yeah.
He would just like keep saying these little things that would try to egg people on to go going after somebody who was a threat to him.
Yeah, I don't like that. So, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, but we got every time we played games, sometimes it would get rough.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody got mad. I think it was just one of those things where, I think that's some of the reason why some of that dissolved is because it just got too hard. There'd be more and more people coming over. I think what was the most amount of people that were over there at his place? Because I think 10 is what I counted.
I want to say, let's see, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or 13 people, I think, was about the highest we'd ever had.
Yeah, and Ben always was a good host and fed everybody. And then it becomes like it becomes like an army. I mean, you were in the military. It becomes like an army kitchen at that point where everybody's just in line getting dishes of food, and you're like, how much pasta did you make? And they're like, a lot, you know. And they would just, you're like, oh, should we just put a sign outside, you know, that like like to let other people in, or like you're feeding a lot of people.
That was kind of always one of the things, though. I mean, it was, you tried to make it like a big family affair where everybody you felt comfortable, relaxed, everybody got to eat.
I remember pitching in for pizza too. Like you'd pitch in like, hey, you know, whatever, but we're all pitching in for pizza. I sent you guys pizza, I sent the house pizza one time, a couple times, because it was like, yeah, you guys have fed me tons of Saturdays, you know, or Fridays or whatever. So like, yeah, I'm sending you a pizza, you know, or it wasn't one. I sent, because I was like, there's probably going to be 13 people there. I remember asking when I ordered it from Pizza Hut, there's 13 people. So what would you recommend? And they had to like go through the menu and be like, all right, well, probably this many larges. If it's this many pieces, yeah, you probably. So like it's weird to go to Pizza Hut and have to go ask the waitress basically, or the waiter, what to get. Instead of looking on the website, just ordering pizza, it was like, yeah, what do you guys recommend? You know, like I'm at some fancy dining restaurant. So that was weird because there was so many people. Do you know what Ben, his favorite game, it seemed to be, was D&D? Because I know you guys did other games, like you said, like Cyberpunk or whatever, but it seemed like it was always D&D. Right. What was D&D his favorite, do you think, out of all those?
During the time, yeah, I think D&D was his favorite.
Because that seemed to be, even though... Right.
What was that one you guys played, like Riff Tracks?
Riffs was one.
Yeah, Riffs.
Yeah.
Riff Tracks, yeah.
No, it's fine. we could have done that too. If it was late at night, nobody wanted to go home.
He really kind of enjoyed that one because it took the whole thing of having, you know, the whole magic side along with the whole technological side,
right, yeah,
and stuff like that.
Well, our joke with tabletops is that Riffs is literally like the sci-fi kitchen sink. And we were out with some friends at a bar nearby, and we were pitching it to our friend Todd. And he's like, well, what is it like? And we were with another friend who knew a lot about Riffs. And actually, the guy brought books with him for some reason. I don't know. And we were at the bar, and Todd said, well, what if I wanted to make a magic-using insect creature? And Ryan was like, well, actually, there's a class for that. It was one of those things where if you could think it up, you could do it. And that was the cool thing about Rifts. The only problem was they released a world book with because it was nuclear war and every continent had been rewritten through nuclear war. And so they released a world book for every continent: Japan, the South America, Russia, stuff like that. The idea that you had to buy all those books, and it was before PDFs. So you had to carry 30 books with you. And it got to the point where I just retired from Rifts because I was like, I can't carry. And then if you didn't buy the books and somebody would come to a session going, I have this crazy character that's from Japan. You're like, okay, well, there's portals and you can travel. Why are they in Louisiana? Or something like that. Like it just got crazy.
Well, that's how I got back when we were playing, what was it, Advanced D&D?
Second edition.
You had, everybody bring their milk crate with their stack of books.
Yeah, and then they even had, remember they had the handbooks, so they had, the Ranger handbook, the Ninja handbook, they had, the Psionicist handbook. So everybody's like, oh, well, 3 handbooks deep, I made a Psionicist ninja, and you're like, what? What?
And you're having to switch back and forth between each book to try to find all that stuff.
I mean, that's one thing I do enjoy about D&D Beyond is with a tablet or a PC, you can look something up
so much easier.
Yeah, it's one of the things where when I am playing I do want to play another game. It's in the D&D universe. It's called Adventures in Middle-earth. It was licensed to be basically Middle-earth D&D. We played it a long time ago. I want to play it with some friends that have never played. Well, one of them has never played. The other one played. But now I have to go back to pen and paper and die rolls, and I got to look stuff. Luckily, it's a PDF, so I could look it up. But, without D&D Beyond, the screen sharing and the combat tracking, it kind of makes me depressed to be like, oh, I got to go back in time. And because I'm just getting used to the D&D Beyond stuff, So, well, anyway, so with Ben, what was when you were there? Like I said, he had stories that he talked about of things that happened when he was at the table. So he wasn't a backstory guy. He was an experienced guy. Do you remember seeing something that he did that blew you away? Where you're like, whoa, I can't believe you just pulled that off.
I still think one of the funniest things he ever did, and this was when we were playing your Middle-earth game.
Oh yeah. If you didn't tell the story, I was. So tell the story. It's great.
You know what? You actually probably tell it better than I do. It was just so hilarious watching him go. What was he? He was like a gnome or something. So the idea was in the
Adventures in Middle-earth is there is a class called a Slayer, which is basically like a berserker, like a barbarian. It's basically someone that has been wronged and wants to exact their revenge. And Ben came up with an insane backstory where hobbits had just basically been discovered in the world of Middle-earth. It was after Smog was destroyed and hobbits are kind of trading. And there's no restrictions in Adventures in Middle-earth. So you could be anything, really. And so Ben goes, well, here's the deal. I want to be a hobbit, but I want to be a fighter. And I'm like, well, that's not really a hobbit's gig. And he goes, haha, here's why we'll change the narrative. My hobbit loved food and everything and hung out with some dwarven merchants and traveled the road with them and became friends with them. But unfortunately, they were killed by orc brigands or something. And so my character became a slayer to avenge their death and kill orcs and the shadow and all this because he saw them die in front of him. And he was like a berserker hobbit, basically, where I remember the big fight I remember was you were fighting one Uruk-hai that you guys were like, where did this come from? And Ben leaped on him, but he's so small, he leaped on the guy's head, and the guy pulls him off, and Ben rolled to fight again and got like a natch. So he's like a cat at this point, just attaching to this thing, and this thing's pulling him off, and he's leaping, and he's like, I'm screaming with my daggers out the whole time or whatever, and I'm like, I have never heard of a berserker hobbit, and this is insane, and it was hilarious. I remember everybody at the table was just laughing, because he's like, yeah, I go back in there, of course I would, like, this is my thing, screw these orcs, like, they killed my family, basically, and I want to kill them, and it was crazy. I was just like, what is happening right now? But it was great, in the best way possible. That was what I was like, yeah, and this is what it is. This isn't, Ben's backstory was only to get him to be a slayer, but all that stuff happened through rolls. I mean, he rolled really well, too. I remember it wasn't something where his slayer whiffed. It was like oh, I'm back in the fight. Like, okay, what do you roll? Oh, I roll. Wow, you're up, you know? And it was, and then I remember there was one thing before that where he went to the Bjorn territory. Because in the lore, the Bjorn, basically they start like a militia. And so people go to Bjorn, train, and they protect the woodland area around the Bjorn's glade, you know, and they protect people. And you have to pay them tolls because you're crossing through their area. So Ben was like, all right, I've got to meet these Bjornings, and I've heard of him. And I go, yeah, people have kind of heard him, you know. And he's like, all right. So he killed like an orc or something in the woods and kept the head, which is really dark for Middle-earth. That's like a really dark thing. And then I remember he got to the gate and bowed and got on his knee and presented it to the guards. And you were Bjorning, but you were like not on guard duty. And the guards are like I was shocked because he's like, I keep the head. I'm like, why would you keep the head of this orc you killed? He's like, you'll see. And I'm like, okay, that's foreboding, Ben. I don't know if I like that. But then when he got to the guard post, he kneeled and presented the head to the guards and said, I'd like to see Bjorn. And they were like, what? Like, what are you doing? But that was like his tribute to get in. And they're like, yeah, we'll just let him in. I don't really want to mess with him, you know, because he's like, the hobbits were supposed to be buttoned up, and he had like dirt on his clothes and was like this traveling murder hobo. And they were just like, let him in, just let him in. And that was something where I was like, Ben, what? I tried to find his character because I have all that stuff when people played. And I think he kept his character, so I don't know where it is. Like, it's probably in a box or something somewhere. But I have everybody...
His binder that's sitting in my old room.
Yeah, it was crazy because I found everybody's character. You know, you had written notes on your character, but I couldn't find it, so he probably kept it. And I wanted to bring that out and just read, because I don't even know his stats or anything. I was just kind of blown away. Like, again, this was all stuff that he did, and it wasn't stuff that he told me. You know, he didn't say like, oh yeah, one time, you know, as a backstory, one time my character killed some orcs and I presented the head to Bjorn. What? No, he did that, you know? And that was one thing where every time
and we would pick on him because while he wasn't paying attention, we tried to steal his hobbit smoke.
Oh, that too. And I think it was him like, I rolled on a chart and he was searching something and found like an ancient dagger, like an artifact or something. And one of the other characters saw it, and the player was a Dunedain, and they recognized a dagger, and they kept wanting to see it. And Ben was like, I'm not showing it to you. And they're like, all right. Like, they just left they're like, I'm not going to mess with this little guy. You keep the dagger, I guess, you know? Like, he just wouldn't. He's like, I earned it. Like, because I remember he role played it. He went through and searched this area and killed something and found it. And the Dunedain's like, let me see that. He's like, why would I show you my dagger? The Dunedain's like, you got a point. Like, he didn't even mess with him. He was like, all right, you know, like, your guy's crazy. What about, like, D&D, though? Do you remember? Because he had, like, Darmok was a well-known character. There was, I forget the other, Kalazar was one of them. Kazar was one.
I mean, that was kind of the thing with Ben, though, is it was kind of like Todd with the chicken ball.
Oh, yeah.
Ben would just randomly think of something while we were fighting, and he would be like, okay, I'm going to do this, and you're like, what? You're going to do what? And he goes, yeah, I'm going to run through here, I'm going to slide between his legs, jump up, bounce off the wall, and stab him in the back of the head. And you're like, huh? And
yep.
He's like, all right, roll. And then, like, he would roll, and he would hit it. And you're just like,
and
it actually worked.
Yeah, it wasn't even like a natural 20. He just rolled well enough to pull it off. Where it's like, by the skin of his teeth, his characters would survive. And you're like, what? You know? Yeah. I remember we played the Star Wars role-playing game one time. Like, back in the day when you had like 200 dice you had to roll before they simplified it. And my character was a Jedi, but didn't realize you could like mask your Force presence. And his character came out to me and was like, oh, hello, Jedi. And I'm like, what? No. Because it was, you know, the Empire was around and I didn't. And I'm like, no, shush, you know. And he's like, oh, and then he's like, well, you, like, in character, he's like, you do know you could turn it down a bit. And I'm like, what? Because apparently I didn't read that roll or whatever. And he's like, everybody was calling me Jedi Master. I was like, you know. And he's like, no, we're fine. You're in safe company and all that kind of stuff, you know. And But that thing of him just being like, I don't know, it was crazy. Like, yeah, again, that was one thing I was always impressed with his playing, was the idea that he pulled it off. Like, and it wasn't a boast. It was like, no, he pulled it off. Like, he would be the one where I wish we played, we did more sessions where it was a continuing story. I think it's a thing with time too, because back then his kids were grown. None of us really had responsibilities. So like you said, it was, you didn't really finish anything you started. And it sucks now. Like, now we're getting older where we finish more campaigns, but we play less, which I actually like, because you do know where the story goes, and something with one character, you see it through to the end, And that was one thing I wish now we were playing, because it's like, no, Ben, we're just going to do this, for 2 hours on a Saturday or whatever, and you're going to run the same character.
It was kind of hard back then, too, because you would think of this grand scheme for this entire game, but then, like, with so many people playing, it just took so long.
Yeah.
That it ended up basically just being a one-shot, like you
went
in a dungeon because you were supposed to kill some certain thing, but you ended up just kind of clearing out the dungeon and never really making it to what you were supposed to kill, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember Rob did a lot of, like, elaborate setups, and there's no time for that. You're like, no, we don't want to discover the mystery. There's 12 of us, That's why when I did the Adventures of Middle-earth, I purposely split the party, because I wanted you guys to have moments where there was only 4 of you, where you could really role play and have moments, and then come together at the end for the finale, But then we were trying to introduce people in, and I wanted there were some people that had never played, like my wife, who had a good time, and my sister-in-law's husband, 2 of them came over to play, because I have 2 sister-in-laws, but it was hard at the end to, and then some of them, I wanted to make it as easy as possible, so I handed out pre-generated characters, but some of them, it was just like, why would a Dwarven treasure hunter care about this quest? If they're a Dwarven treasure hunter, they want to go find treasure. They don't want to be on some mystery of the 9 or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think the bad part about the groups with Ben is just the amount of people. And me kind of going, I don't want to do that, like if I run a game, I don't want that many people, and
well,
so,
if he was still around the way like we're playing right now, where you have 4 of us playing, 3 of us playing 1 D&D. Yeah. That right there, I think he really would have shined a little bit better.
Yeah, and at first with Zoom, I didn't. Yeah, because you can spend more time with people, and I think with Zoom there's an adjustment because you're looking at a screen this big or whatever with people, but I think that it's easier. Like now that I've got the cadence down of Zoom and how everything interacts and things hit differently, you got to work out some technical things. Like I think all that is getting better, and I think now even with Zoom, I think it would have been good. That's one of the reasons. I've missed him a lot lately. I know May 7th was his birthday, and I thought about him a lot. Your birthday is like mid-May? Yeah, oh, so you're right after him, yeah. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this month. I didn't do it exactly on his birthday because I was trying to find podcasts with him and stuff like that, and that's why this episode and the next episode, he bought me that Dishonored 2, and I told you the story where I couldn't trade the game to anybody, and you owned it. You were one of the ones I tried to trade the game to. You're like, no, I own it. And I'm like, go. But I keep looking at it, and I told my wife, like, hey, I got to play that game and beat it, because every time I look at it, I think of Ben. And, he was like, I heard this is a good game. I think you should play it. And I did play it for a little bit, and was like, this is good. Ben did a good thing. This is a good game. I like it. And then I never finished it. And so I think I want to finish it. And then, obviously me talking to you, I know when we did the memorial originally, his mother was up from Georgia, and she's very religious. And I think it was Ben was a really gregarious guy. He was a great host, and he loved to laugh. That's actually one of the things I miss most about Ben's, just his laugh. That's one thing I miss. And it was so somber. I didn't want to be disrespectful to his mom because that's how she dealt with what was going on. But it felt like when we were all telling stories, we couldn't tell good stories, or we couldn't laugh too loud. But that's just how she grieves. And I can't fault her for that. But I think you and me talking about this, like really laughing about Ben. And like, that's why I wanted to do this interview. One, I wanted you to talk about your brother, and then two, I wanted to make it more joyous then.
Yeah, just thinking back on stuff, like we were talking about. I remember when, like, in 90 or 85 or so, when we got that first Nintendo. And
the gray one, the NES, you got the gray one? Yeah.
Yeah, the gray original NES with Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
During the day, we were always outside. That's just how our generation grew up.
Yeah.
But
because if you were inside, you were a failure. Like my mom all the time, go outside. Why? All this stuff I like is in here. Go outside. Dang it. Like you had to,
And then, when the street lights came on and we went in the rest of the night, we'd eat dinner and then we'd be on a game.
Especially in the summer when you had remember the summers when you had no responsibility and you could, remember that when you could just stay up till, you're like, you know what, tonight I'm going to beat Rampage, like I'm,
That's like when we got Super Contra.
Oh.
Oh my God. We got Super Contra, and me and him, we went, what was it? It was about 20 miles to this gas station, because we lived down in the middle of nowhere. But we drive down there, we got like sausage dogs, some candies, some soda.
The worst food you can imagine. Yeah, it's like disgusting.
The worst food possible.
Even nowadays, you're like, I don't want to put that in me.
Yeah, then we went home, and we spent the entire night playing Contra.
Yeah.
So we could beat it.
Yeah.
And it's just thinking back on that, and I always hated it, as the younger brother, the older brother always would be just a little bit better.
That's a thing, man.
You're like, whatever.
Did you ever go to him for game help? Like if you were playing something and or were you guys always playing together? Or if you got stuck, would you like, bro, I can't do this. Would he come in and like, okay, let me get you past this point and then we'll move on to, or you can move on to something else?
Every once in a while. I mean, that happened a little bit later when we started having different game consoles, like Xbox or something like that. That game Neverwinter.
I remember Neverwinter, yeah. Neverwinter Night. Well, there was Neverwinter Nights, which was like the turn-based one, and then there was Neverwinter, which was more, yeah.
And I was like, hey, how do you get through this? How do you do this? I'm like, I keep dying every time I get to it, and I knew he was a little bit ahead of me in the game, so he was like, oh yeah, you just come through, you do this, and you run around the side. I'm like, oh, cool.
Well, him and I did it with Portal. We got Portal when it came out on the PC on Steam, and we would have a race, like an unofficial race, where I think we started playing around the same time. And, in the first game, you're in test rooms for the beginning of the game. So you're in test room 1, and you have to do a puzzle to use the portal gun to figure something out, and they get progressively harder. I think there was 19 test rooms, and so we would call each other, and he's like, what room are you on? And I'm like, 5. He's like, damn it, I'm on 3. So then a day later, I'd call, what room are you on? Oh, I'm on 7. Oh, man, I'm on 6. So, like, we were trying to beat each other through the test rooms, and see who could. And it was just like, man. And then we did Portal 2 because, like, well, you got to keep the tradition going. Hey, they're coming out with Portal 2. And he smoked me. He smoked me so hard. I'd be like, what room are you in? And that game was structured a little differently. But he was still like, oh, I'm in this area. And I'm like, I have never even heard of that area. He's like, well, then you're behind. And I'm like, grr. So I'd try to, yeah. And then I did get him a couple times where I'm like, I figured this one puzzle out pretty easily. He's like, oh, that took me like forever. But then when he pulled away from me in the game, it was, I was in this room for 30 minutes. And he's like, oh, you didn't just shoot the portal straight up and then whatever. And then I'm like, what? I didn't even know you could do. He's like, yeah, it was like super simple. And I'm like, oh. And then that is when he just leapt. He's like, oh yeah. And then there was co-op missions to that. He got another friend of ours, Yefe, Jeff. He got Yefe involved, and and then he's like, well, where are you in the game? And it crushed my soul, Joseph. It crushed my soul where I was like, I can't play anymore. I was like a defeated 10-year-old. I'm like, I can't. Even to this day, I haven't beat. Maybe that's something else I should do. Just one day, just beat Portal 2 and be like, suck it, Ben. I finally beat it. Like, because it literally did crush me when he's like, it was like he breezed through that game, and within a week, had got to there, and I was so defeated. I was like, one, I don't know if I could ever come over to your house again, Ben, and two, I can't play this game. I don't think after he told me he beat it that I opened it up again to play because it was so demoralizing for him to just run the game so quickly where I'm like,
That was Ben, though, man. Like, he was low-key when he did it, but when it came to video games and stuff like that, like, he was super into making sure he beat people.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you're like, yeah, we're at the same level, blah, 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 he goes, yeah, I'll pass you in the morning or something like that. Then next thing you know, he's like 5 levels ahead of you. You're like, how did you do that?
He's like, well, I stayed up till 4 in the morning and grinded. He did that in World of Warcraft, too. We played, did you ever play with us when we were playing World of Warcraft?
No, when Ben was playing World of Warcraft, that was during a time where me and him kind of wasn't around each other. It was, while I was married and the kids were small and we didn't really, it's not I didn't really communicate with anybody because it was just a bad time.
Yeah.
But no, I listened to some of the things he used to do. You know how he played, what was it, one of the trap hunters?
Yeah, he was a hunter and he used traps, and it was almost like he could just write a forum thread. He's one of those people that if he wanted to, he never did. He could write a forum thread on the correct way to run. And he'd be one of those, like, I don't like reading those because I'm like, oh, teach their own. But when you watch Ben play his hunter in World of Warcraft, you're like, yeah, that's kind of like how it should be done. You know what I mean? Like, he's doing everything. He's trapping people. He's doing this. And he even said when he went out and runs with people in the, Karazhan or there was like this 72-hour raid where you would attune to. He would run it several times to get equipment, and he would get accolades because he'd go in a random group sometimes, and he would get accolades afterwards about, hey man, that's the best. You're the best person I've ever seen run a hunter, Yeah. And he'd show me the letters in game, like somebody would write him a letter and be like, or on a message thread, see this? Somebody said that to me, and like, that's crazy, and then he joined the guild. There was a local guild that we joined, and Ben just said there was a lot of like pre-planning, which drove him crazy because he had ran Karazhan so much. He's like, let's just go, and like the guy wanted to plan for 40 minutes, There was no Leroy Jenkins. There was all the planning, and Ben was like, I know this, let's just go. And, but yeah, Ben was like that. And I remember him telling me stories. He goes, yeah, I out DPS the rogue, which I was like, what? Like, that shouldn't be possible. And he's like, I did it. And I'm like, oh. And then he was one of those people going, man, they nerfed my pets. They nerfed my traps. He was one of those guys when they would release patch notes, it'd be like, damn it. Like he'd be like so mad. Like, but he knew, but that's what he did. And then he said he had to quit because he goes, I calculated how much time I was spending, and it was, what do you say, 20 hours a week or 30 hours. It was an insane amount of time. And he's like, I gotta step away. I can't do this anymore. So he had to.
Yeah. Well, when it came to games and certain stuff, he had a very addictive personality when it came to that stuff.
He did. But he did realize that he had to walk away. But yeah, he did early on. He would get sucked in pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, and like with his martial arts too. He would start, I started doing Kung Fu. Well, now he's doing Kung Fu every single day.
Yeah.
For like 3 hours
a day. Yeah, you probably talked to him about that. I did. I was like, take one day off because you're going to hurt yourself. And he did. He hurt himself. Like twice, I think. I think it was like twice. Yeah. I was like, you just take one day off to let your body rest, And he's like, no. And he lost like 60 pounds or something. So he saw results, and he's like, I got to push forward. And I'm like, I get, you're seeing results, but you're going to snap something, you're going to spin or something and your ankle's going to break. Like, and he's like, no. And I get that idea of he was actually seeing results. And so he stayed with it, but yeah. It was,
but that was just, when it came to like martial arts or games, he was super competitive.
Yeah.
And it used to always drive me crazy because you start playing something and you're trying to one-up him, and then he one-ups you, and then one-ups you again.
Well, again, Portal 2... Yeah, Portal 2 broke my soul where I was like, never again, Ben. We're not doing that. Like, I'm not... Whatever you're playing... Because we would do that too, like Guild Wars 2, you bought the game and then it was free every month, which was great. But he's like, hey, are you logging on? I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm not, he's like, okay, well, I'll just run X. And then you'd log on. You're like, what level is your guy? He's like, oh, 25. And I'm like, oh, I just made a guy. I'm level 2. Crap, Now, there was things in Guild Wars 2 where they would, like, get you to that level or whatever, which was nice. But I always felt like he's like, I'm like, you're literally slumming it with me here in the lobby level. He's like, oh, that's fine. But yeah, he did do that. I mean, that's one of the things I still miss, though. And it was funny when we did the podcast, he'd always be like, well, you're the gaming guy and I'm the movie guy. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's true, Ben. But like when you play a game, like I do impressions of games and I like a wide berth and swath of games to try. You are like a laser where you focus on Guild Wars 2 and that's what you do for 20 hours a week, or World of Warcraft. Me, I'm like, oh, I tried this for a few hours. I tried that for a few hours,
And this one, like, you remember us starting to play the Division.
Oh, yeah.
We were playing the Division. Like, he was like, oh, yeah, get this game. We'll all play and everything. And I'd get it, and I'd be like, well, what level have you been? And he's like, oh, I'm this. I'm like, shit. Like, get up to that.
It started all over again where you're like, here we go again. Here we're going to get on the treadmill.
And then I finally called up with him because he had to work at the time and I did.
There you go.
I was going to school.
It was like the one time.
I kind of got back to where we were level.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
and then we'd go do the playing with like you and Carla or you and like
my in-laws or whatever. Yeah, my in-laws. Yeah. Well, one cool thing about the Division, Ben came over to house it because Carla and I went out of town, and he literally downloaded his profile onto my Xbox so he could come over and play the Division while he was house sitting, because he'd check on the dogs. He'd just make sure nothing was, messed up, and just spend some time with the dogs a little bit. But I was like, how long were you here? And he's like, about 40 minutes. I'm like, you played the Division, didn't you? And he's like, yeah, like I logged on and did this and that. His profile is still in my Xbox. So every time I see his profile, and I'm like, I've had a lot of worse things on my Xbox, So, yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is because, like I said, I don't want to disrespect his mom, but like it was so somber when we did that. We got together and spoke about him, and she wanted to do it to celebrate his life, but I felt like it was so quiet. Like I was like, I don't think, I want to laugh more. I want to, because Ben would like that,
It was somber because, I mean, yes, his mom was there, but there was the friction in the house.
Yeah.
Because of everything that was going on and all of that. But it just, it happened so, well, I mean, it kind of happened fast.
Well, he had cancer for a while, but when he deteriorated, I think that was fast. Like, we knew he had cancer and he's going through treatments. That part was like, ooh.
He got the cancer. They did the surgery. They put that head thing on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing okay for a little while, but then it came back so fast.
Yeah.
And he had just basically given up. Like, he didn't try to fight it anymore. He just sat there and he gained a lot of the weight back that he had lost.
Well, he couldn't, remember, he was starting to go numb. Like, he couldn't walk. Like, he couldn't, he couldn't do the things to be active. Like, he had a cane, and then he...
Yeah. And you'd have to walk with him because we'd take him to the store to go get something, and I would have to stand on, I think it was his left side, because he couldn't see anything on his left
Oh, that's
side.
right. He said his vision... Well, because the tumor or whatever was right next to his ocular, and they took that out, but
he would run into people or run into things, so you would have to basically sit there with it and make sure he didn't run into anything.
Yeah.
And, it was sad to see when, at nights, when it was him and Debbie, and then I was across the hall. If he fell or if something happened, then I would have to go over there and help pick him up and get him back in the bed or get him finish doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a sad thing, and it was a hard thing.
I mean, that's one of the reasons when Carla said, do you want to go to therapy? I was like, yes. Like, I was like, yeah, to keep my sanity, I think. And my therapist reminded me it's been like 2 years. He's like, by the way, you've been doing this for 2 years. I was like, Wow. And then not to talk about therapy, but he wants to know what I'm writing because he goes, I want you to write and send me what you're writing. So effectively I have homework. So I sent him a short story and what did my therapist write? He said, this story, he said, your story is also dark, foreboding. It has great kind of great elements of dark fantasy or something. And then he said, but there's a glimmer of hope there. And I said, you just described my life in 3 sentences. Dark, foreboding with just a glimmer of hope. And, but yeah, I mean, that was one of the things. I mean, listening to Ben, I listened to some of the podcasts with him on it. And I asked my wife, I'm like, do you want to hear it? Like I found it. And she listened to a couple minutes and she said, this really makes me sad. And then she woke up this morning and said, I was sad about it, but happy at the same time to hear his voice because he was happy in that clip. We were talking. He was healthy. It's weird, the power of just his voice, of like hearing that again, so.
Well, and it's just so crazy because you think of things in like Christmas time.
Oh my God. All
he wanted to do was bake. You think Christmas time, you think Ben baking.
It was what he did. Carla and I still have fights over the treats we didn't get because one of us would eat them. Like she ate all of his roasted, he did like roasted walnuts or roasted chestnuts or something. Carla ate all of those. Yeah. So I got none of them. And so it would happen so many years. I'd be like, Ben, you didn't put any roasted walnuts or whatever. And he'd look at Carla and she'd start laughing. But Carla's like, Joe, you ate all of his pecan bar bites because he made pecan bars and then would slice them up really small. And then I would eat all of them. And Carla's like, we didn't get any of those. Or no, that's what we said. We were joking around about it last night. We were talking about Ben and everything. And she goes, I said, well, she goes, strangely enough, he didn't put any roasted walnuts in any Christmas thing. I said, that sounds a little suspect. And she goes, yeah, but then the pecan things were gone. I was like, well, that's something he forgot too. He just forgot to put those in because I was eating all of those and she was doing the walnuts. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And he said too, when he started doing that, he realized it was as much as just buying somebody something. Like it costs, because he was like giving them to people at work. He was giving them to us. He was giving them to their friends. It was just like, he'd bring over these big care packages of just treats,
Well, and you know how Ben got to where he would go shopping at like, what was that, the Met and places like that. So when he was buying all the ingredients for all that stuff,
it was expensive.
He was buying the expensive stuff.
Yeah, he wasn't getting like the Costco bag of walnuts. He was like, oh, look, these ones that are grown in a farm in Connecticut. You're like, why, Ben? Why? Like, we don't know. Like, bake them. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, he would do that, though.
I mean, it was just, you think of little things like that. Like, he was always, even if he was having a bad day, we would still crack jokes and do stuff just to make each other feel better. Like when I first went back there, I had horrible anger management issues. Mm-hmm. And I would kind of black out, cuss somebody out.
Oh.
The tone of your voice, the way you said something, the way you looked at me, I would just cuss you out.
Right.
And Ben would just look at me and goes, hey, do you know what you just said? I'd say, no, what did I say? And he said, you just said this to me. I'm like, oh, wow. He never got mad at me. He never got angry.
He's like, hey, just to let you know.
He just let me know.
Yeah, I'm family, it's okay, but you might not want to go to Walmart and like pipe off like that. Like,
but that was one of those things, and he just never got mad. He was always supporting. Him and Jeff used to always laugh at me because every other word would be like F-bombs. I would just drop F-bombs left and right. And they'd be like, we're going to start a swear jar.
I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. They're like, we're going to start a swear jar for you. And by the time you're done with this swear jar...
You should have just wrote him like a blank check and been like, here, at the end of the month, just write the amount. Like, you guys keep count, and I'll cut you a check. Because there's no way I'm going to be able to keep track of what it...
But I mean, that was just how he always was. He never really got mad. That's like I got a picture of him, and it makes me laugh so hard from the 80s when he had his old T-Bird, which was like an 85 or an 86 T-Bird. and him and his friend Michael were in their zoomy pants, like
the hammer pants.
Boys. Yeah, the hammer pants with the big square sunglasses and their little flat tops, acting like, well, Ben had a flat top. Mike had like...
I saw one photo of that and it blew my mind to see Ben with a flat top. I think it was a military thing where he had to... And I was like...
Yeah, he was an ROTC.
Yeah, I was like, you have a flat top? He's like, yeah, it was a regulation. I'm like, the flat top was not kind to you, Ben. I mean, I love you, man, but like, no, that was not the best. But I mean... I literally just when I had hair, I just let it go, I think he gave me a hard time of like, do you want to run a comb through that, like years ago when I was like, no. Yeah, the flat top wasn't kind to him though.
It was just like, he was going to be a wrestler, him and his buddy, they were going to be like the Nasty Boys, and...
That was what it was in the 80s. That was what you're going to do.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, you just remember all the times with him, and it was always something funny.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple of bad times, but they were few and far between. It was always him in a good mood, him trying to be happy, him trying to make everybody around him happy.
I only saw him in a bad mood once, and that's when I came back when I was studying abroad, and I came back just to see how I was doing, and I hadn't talked to him in a while, and he was going through the divorce. And I was like, what's going on? And he told me, and I was like, are you all right? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay. And that was kind of all he said about it, But I mean, having time alone, I remember him telling me later, reflecting, having time alone, he said it was probably some of the best times of his life because he was able to figure out, like everybody always talks about self-care and a mental health day, but to really be alone and take time and really be with yourself is important. And I think he found that. And it was great to see him change like that too, to be a different person later on, And then he still wanted to game. Because I remember we were talking about gaming, and I said, man, because we both kind of stepped away from tabletops and all that for a while. And I said, hey, man, I'm really thinking of doing some more tabletop again. And he goes, I've been thinking the same thing. Like we started to kind of get the itch, and it was really cool to see him be a better, happier person, and then also play and still keep see that jovial part of him, nothing broke, like he was happier and better,
Well, and that's one of the things I love too, because when I did go back up there, when it was just him, you could tell like he had worked through a lot of things that he had been going through with all that. And, he was out and about. It kind of reminded me of, like, when we were younger and he would be, hey, let's go to the movies. Hey, let's go do this. Hey, let's go get some cookie. Let's go get the cookie from the Met. Or let's go to Carrena's.
Yeah.
Let's go do this and let's go do that. Let's go to the I say French market. It's not the French market. It's
there's that German. There was that. Oh yeah, there was. Did he ever take you to that German market too? There was like a German market and a German bakery next to each other too, like somewhere there.
Yeah. We used to go there all the time. We pick up like Landjaeger and some other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, we go do all that, and I mean, I attribute that to why I'm as fat as I am.
But you're happier, Todd. You're happier because remember that he made you happier for actually having to go do that. So yeah, don't get too mad.
It was great times. I sit there every once in a while and I'll be like, damn him for making me eat all this stuff. It was so good.
But then it was worth it. Yeah.
It was so worth it.
Yeah, it was so good. I mean, again, that's why I wanted to do this, was because I wanted to laugh about Ben, and I've been thinking about him a lot lately, because of his birthday and everything too. So I forget, what year did he pass away? That's one thing. Was it 2019 or 2018?
2019.
Was it 19? That sounds. It was like.
No, it was 2018.
Yeah.
Because Mom and Dad left right after.
Because it was in.
And then you had all the COVID stuff happen.
Right.
So
like a year later, yeah. Was it?
Yeah.
Because it was like earlier in the year when he passed too, like.
February.
Yeah, because. Yeah, I think it was March, because I remember getting that text from Debbie, because we had been over and seeing him, and hospice was there, and it was like, well, it's really only a matter of time. And then we were coming over every day, and then I got the text from Debbie like in the morning.
Yeah, it happened early in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So what is one thing that you'll always remember about Ben? I mean, we've already talked about like just in general. It doesn't have to be gaming or anything, you know. For me, it's his laugh. That's one thing I always remember. That thing where it was just so loud. If we were in a movie theater and we got separated for whatever reason, if we got tickets, because back in the day you couldn't assign seats, so it's like, oh crap, and Ben's like, all right, I'll go sit over here. Okay, cool. I knew exactly where Ben was in the theater because if there was a funny scene, I would hear him laugh like across, and I'd be like, Ben is in 4C, or you know, like I could hear it across. That was one thing I'll miss about Ben is his.
That's another funny thing thinking about it, because you remember how anal Ben was if somebody pull out their cell phone or something while you guys were watching a movie.
It was the scariest I've ever felt, and his anger wasn't directed at me, where I was like, ooh, he's gonna kill someone. Like I thought he was.
Yeah, like the one time where he like slid over the chairs to somebody like 2 rows in front of him and was like, turn off your phone.
Well, yeah, he didn't even. He cussed, but he didn't use the F word a lot. But I've seen him use the F word when it was the phone at the theater. Where I saw him do the same thing, like you said at one time, where he leaned over and he goes, turn off your fucking phone. I was like, whoa, man. Whoa. Like, that's crazy. Like, that would set him off. But what's one thing that you remember about Ben? Is it that? Is his...
No, it wasn't so much that. I'll tell you, one of the things that I will always remember about Ben was our weekends. When we'd go get those shitty sausage dogs, candy, and all that.
Go back and play Contra?
One of his favorite movies that we watched back then was King Ralph.
Oh, yeah, he talked about that. And I remember when you moved up, he's like, remember King Ralph? And you guys would look at each other. And I'm like, I've seen it twice. And you guys, greatest movie of all time. I'm like, is it really? Like, you're like, it was to us. Greatest movie of all time to us.
It was the greatest movie to us because the closest rental place was where we'd get those crappy sausage dogs and candy and everything.
I get it.
They had like a little section where you could rent movies and stuff like that. And we saw King Ralph, and we're like, well, it's got John Goodman in it and everything. It should be pretty funny.
He's great,
and
yeah.
We got it, and we just laughed our asses off the whole night watching that movie. And,
I'll probably have to watch it again. It's been years. I remember a teacher, I think, was just tired of us, and it was one of those last school day things where I'd seen it, and she goes, I'm just going to put on King Ralph, and then just messed around at her desk for it was like the last day of school when she obviously didn't want to be bothered. She probably put some bourbon in her coffee and was just sitting there grading papers, quote unquote. And I was like, why are we watching? Because like, I get it's your last day, but you'd figure like, okay, we're in science. We're going to watch this documentary. It's the last day, but let's watch something science related. It was an English class. She goes, well, we're going to put on, it's a literature class. We're just going to put on King Ralph. And I'm like, what is happening here? I don't know why, but it was the last day where she's like, I don't give a crap, like you guys don't.
You gotta be here.
You don't care. I don't care. I'm putting on King Ralph. I'll probably do that. I'll probably watch King Ralph again, and I'll let you know my new review of King Ralph from 1985. So do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
It's been hard since he's been gone, but I mean, I still play the games, I still do that, and every time we played D&D or every time I always still picture him here with us.
Yeah, I think he was. I think
just laughing and
I think we'd have to tell him to mute his mic the most, because if he would start laughing, like we wouldn't be able to hear anything. Like Ben, mute your mic, like it would be. I remember one time he was playing World of Warcraft and he didn't mute his mic and he was listening to Radiohead. And I was like, Ben, are you listening to Radiohead right now? And he's like, yeah, how do you guys know? I go, do you have your mic directly in front of your stereo? And he's like, is it that loud? We're like, Ben, all we hear, like, I listen to Radiohead too. I know exactly what album you're listening to, what track you're on. He's like, oh crap, I'll turn it off. Yeah, it was pretty funny. So Yeah, I still miss him. I definitely miss him. But like you said, you did that, especially with me with the website or the podcast talking about grief. You do have this feeling of like people still kind of being around, you know, like me talking about my dad and talking about my mom. Like they're still kind of around talking about Ben. You know, that's kind of like the legacy that people leave. You know, and Ben, it was a great legacy. I never think about Ben and go, oh man, you know that one time I really screwed it, like we really got mad at each other. I mean, you obviously know him a lot longer than I am, but all that is completely, I mean, I don't have any of those. It's always like, man, that dinner was really good, or like we made each other laugh, or we made the short film together. Like they're all good memories, you know? I don't think I had one bad memory with Ben. I think one time we got in a disagreement or something really dumb, like a movie or something.
Yeah.
But
well, no, I mean, it was always good. And I mean, that's like that time I met you guys in Reno.
oh, that was amazing.
That was an amazing night.
Didn't you drive for like 2 hours to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great.
I was living in California at the time.
Yeah, I was like, oh, you're here. And you're like, hey, what's up? And I was like, wow, it's crazy. I haven't seen you in years. And then, yeah, we just hung out all night. And was you and Ben were out late that one night, though. I remember that. Where,
Oh, yeah, because we all went to that strip club.
yeah. And
It
then,
was like Ben's first time ever going to
oh,
a
yeah.
strip
And
club.
he did this stereotypical thing where he's like, she's cute. I'm like, don't do it, Ben. Don't.
Oh, she liked me. She really, no, Ben. She
He did
she's
the,
trying to make money.
yeah, he did the thing. Oh, that poor gentle soul. Well, I still think about Ben a lot. Joseph, thanks for talking. I know it's probably a little bit rough, but I wanted to make it happier. Like I said, I don't have a bad memory about Ben, and I'd rather do this than have a subdued dinner where we can't talk about things, you know? So
Well,
thanks for doing this.
Not a problem. And like I said, your family too. You were all, I've known you since 2000.
Yeah, I think that's when yeah.
Like 99 or 2000.
Yeah.
And you've always been around and you've always been part of the family, so.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things, man. But yeah, I mean, thanks, and I'll probably have you on the podcast again because I'm probably gonna do something D&D related. Like maybe I might record, like I've done it with my wife and my friend, but I'm gonna record like a one shot, and so maybe I'll have everybody on to just do a one shot, our group, and I might put that with everybody's permission. I might put that on the podcast. So, yeah, if you're up for it.
Definitely.
Cool. And that was it. That was that was me talking to Joseph, Ben's stepbrother. So yeah, we just tried to, make it a little bit happier, like we said, and kind of reminisce about Ben. So, again, this podcast will have my website, www.gamewithgrief.com, Monday morning, 7 a.m. Go there, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the show. Or you can go over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast there. It's the Gaming with Grief podcast with Joseph Carlson. Or you can go to the Google Play Store, subscribe to the podcast there. Same title, same icon, black icon with a smoky background. Leave a comment, review, likes, all that kind of stuff. Or you can write me an email at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Write me there. Again, let me know how I can improve the show, or just generally, let me know if you've actually heard the show. That would be good too. Or you can go to Twitter and find me there at Just Little Joe. So I think with that, everybody, I think that's kind of a wrap for this week. And I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.